Hello and back again, now into recording number 11, Culture, Part 1. I have great admiration for the U.S. physicist Richard Feynman. And one of the things he did was find a way to make the sort of arcane way that subatomic particles interact mathematically easily understood through diagrams. And so it made me think, I wonder if we couldn't make culture diagrams as well. And sure we can, and that's what we're going to do. No surprise, there's 4 cultures, and the same names as the personalities they stem from. In fact, what we're doing here is analyzing groups of people with the same methods that we looked at individual innate personalities with. And where would you find cultures that are based in deep values, particularly values around humans, things like Habitat for Humanity? Where would you find cultures that address people's relational needs? I think the simplest case, any marketing firm, any firm doing custom products would have this kind of culture advisedly. Where would you find the blue visioning cultures in research universities? The research arms of companies of all sorts, particularly the people that invented the iPod and Microsoft would have a research arm. I want you to look at the diagrams here, how differently people would communicate. I think it's clear that the yellow cultures, people would much prefer to speak and talk together. The visioning cultures, people prefer to use emails. The University of Colorado, I measured the business school. It was a very, very pure blue culture. What people complained most about was faculty meetings. They hated to interact with one-on-one. And finally, of course, any manufacturing activity is obviously orange. And something you may not have thought about is governments are inevitably orange. This is how this works. What we're going to look at is your culture 1D. This is a typical business culture that's mostly orange. If the orange goes out too far, the dynamic is you pull in the green, quit valuing people. And if you have a culture like that, you're just throwing money away. Is it 4D, which means just like the personality, you've got your lead in the right place, the others above threshold. That's a good culture. I discovered early on as a consultant that there was a crucial factor in winning competitions, and that is getting your proposal team, your proposal, and your business plan aligned with your customer. If it's both orange, you will win and beat anyone that mismatches, and if it's mismatched, you will lose if someone else puts in a reasonably competent proposal and matches. This is a quote from 2 Harvard professors, Cotter and Heskett. I've modified this a little bit to make their jargon match mine. But look at this. Firms that built cultures that fit the strategy. That means firms that marketed and put their whole system in alignment, grew net income. And if you're not familiar with business terminology, net income is another word for profit. 5 to 10 times faster. Not 5 to 10% faster. 5 to 10 times faster than other companies. This is powerful stuff here. So I used to diagram the culture of organizations with an instrument that measured all 4. As I've worked for the last 15 years, only one green culture that I ever encountered, and it's a very unusual organization I did a workshop for, the Colorado State Mental Health Board. Every other one has been orange or blue. And so I decided to make it simpler and easier. We'll use the appreciation score in the TDA, because every team we do a workshop for has a TDA to measure the green level, how they include others to measure the yellow level. And now we use a little short test instrument to find out whether the blue or orange leads. See, I mostly work with business and technical organizations, and blue or orange is always going to lead the company. These are the questions. You go to your workbook and circle whichever one's more true. Try to capture the essence of each culture here, and you can read these later in the workbook, or maybe I should talk about them a little bit. Technical organizations, the technical geniuses rule. For example, University of Colorado, the power was always in the tenured faculty that were writing the big research papers. And in most businesses it's the hierarchical management according to the standard org chart. The blue culture tends to have lots of freedom of action. Nobody worries a lot if you go around somebody to report news. And back to the business school, you could tell the dean something without going through any supervisor. Nobody cared. Over here on the orange side, boy, you don't bypass management. And the reason I'll show you later is the importance of control. Performance is what they care about more than budget. And what I'll show you later too is that, yeah, they care about budget, but in the end of the day, the blue culture is going to make the performance goals, not just the lower levels, but the best you can do. And over here, the budget is in charge. The management processes tend to be poorly documented. People tend to pretty much behave with regard to process how they want. If they're get back to the business school, very few processes about anything. Over here in a typical orange business, everything's documented, processes optimized. And the blue personality types, which tend to dominate and have the power in these cultures, tend to speak pretty frankly and in terms that are impolite. I'll never forget the first time I made a presentation at a science conference. And by the way, those are blue culture forums. The criticism that people threw at other scientists about their work was at first really kind of scary, but that's how it's done. And over in the orange culture, people, especially if they talk up to management, they're much more polite. That's the simplest way I could think of the major process differences. So what we do, we have people fill it out in their workbook, and then we get a vote by hand. This is one of the very rare cases where it's not anonymous. And one of the reasons is this is usually not very emotional, not very controversial. And if there are two teams in the room, we take two teams in the room, we'll score them separately. Often I have two teams in a room that are working together with my workshops, a contractor and a subcontractor, or a government team and a contractor team. So we'll score them separately, team A and team B. And this is the same language I just showed you before, just summarized. Raise hands and record it up and see what we see. Then we record this on a diagram, and the way I like to do this is whatever has the bigger score, the blue or the orange, I make, say if it's a blue score, I make the line here for the blue. I make it somewhat less here for the green. For the orange, because I think these are the two strong factors. And looking at the scores, I'll make draw these in over here, but I'll very seldom, in fact, never make these personal side pieces bigger than the orange or blue, whichever is the smaller of these two. And then we talk about this and see how well it matches the task. The nature of the blue culture, the magnetic field metaphor is aligned toward the blue. Everything's being pushed by the field toward the blue. These are the values. People get included by accomplishment. I made here a Nobel Prize or publications. The vision is creativity wins. And this is the org chart. It's upside down. Now, you may not believe this, but the University of Colorado operated exactly like this. I didn't believe it myself until I watched it operate. So what happened is the president would have some kind of an idea to do something, and the tenured faculty would decide they didn't like it, and they'd send hateful, nasty emails around all afternoon, and by sundown, the idea was forgotten. So I was strategic advisor to the dean, which is in these black boxes here. So one day I said to the dean, now understand the faculty, understand the president, but what does the dean do? He said, it's like this. The faculty think deeply about things, and the president makes speeches. The dean's job is to make sure the president doesn't think and the faculty don't make speeches. That's kind of a little fun thing. The challenge is working together. This is the yellow is their great weakness. It's the diagonal, so that's what they find difficult. The orange culture, the field aligns all the particles in this direction. Their values are around consistency, reliability, quality, customer satisfaction. People tend to include each other according to where they are in the org chart, tend to give power according to the org chart. The vision is business success. These entities, these companies often have a warlike stance about competitors. And there's the org chart. Power, inclusion just match up almost perfectly. In contrast to the blue culture, where nobody would have any problem with the faculty member socializing with the president, and the faculty may even have higher salaries than the president. That won't happen here. The challenge is caring for people, seeing people as people, empathizing with people, their real needs. This, to the perspective of the orange, just looks like something kind of, as you probably heard it called, touchy-feely. So what's interesting about the orange culture, and it's the most common, that's why I like to talk about it, is that control is everything. In fact, control is so important that you must appear to be in control all the time. So when I was in the middle of the Hubble mirror flaw, the NASA administrator called me on his car phone. He was heading over to talk to other parts of the government about what was going on. And he wanted me to explain the modulation transfer function of defined guidance sensors in Hubble. Now, I don't expect you to know what that means, and he probably didn't either. But my point is that this technical detail is to be able to recite it when it's not an executive function is endemic in these cultures. So I want to illustrate this with a joke. It's about a man who gets a knock on his door, and a new neighbor just came. And the neighbor says, look, I need your help. I've got to suddenly go out of town. I've got a personal crisis, and I need you to take care of my dog for a couple of days. Could you do that for me? So I don't know what your dog likes. Well, he's a cute little thing. He's just as agreeable as can be. He's no trouble, whatever. He's over there locked up in the house right now, and I don't think he'll give you any problem. And you say, well, I don't know. He says, look, man, I'm really in a world of hurt. Can you help me here? So you say, okay, it's a new neighbor. You want to make a good impression. So the guy drives away, and after a couple hours, you go over there and open the door and walk into the kitchen, and you don't see what's going on. You walk down to the end and away from the door, and suddenly this giant menacing dog leaps out, and it's advancing towards you, and it's snarling, and drool is dripping on down its mouth. And you're terrified. You back up, and you're backed against the wall. The dog keeps advancing. You reach out with your hand, and you find a bag of dog biscuits. So you're throwing the biscuits to the dog, but there's one problem. You're going to run out. When you have the equivalent in the orange culture, the data dog will demand that you give it information the same way that this dog demands to be fed to keep it happy, and you can never run out of biscuits. And consistent biscuits are like consistency, doing reports the way they're supposed to be, on time, providing data, providing plans. That's the nature of the culture. I think it's really interesting that the elements in a typical business org chart match up to the 4 dimensions. Here's the sort of training department, if you will, the marketing department, the research department, and manufacturing. And and this is the most likely head is orange. So a good organization will understand and not impose orange on the parts where it doesn't work well. In contrast, a broken organization will go rampant with the data dog and kill everybody with processes and requirements that just diminish their capacity to do their core function well. This is the most common thing I find. So let's take a break here, and then we'll come back and look at culture and competition. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye.